Day One wiped the grease from his hands and stared at the broken coolant pipe. It was the third one this week. The colony ship times, Eternal Dawn times, was old, and old ships always had problems. He didn't mind. Fixing things was what he did best. He crawled through the narrow maintenance tunnel, his toolbox scraping against the metal floor. Around him, the ship hummed with life. 50,000 people were sleeping, eating, and dreaming of their new home on Kepler 442. They didn't think about the pipes that brought them water, or the systems that gave them air. That was Day One's job. Corporal. Are you finished yet? The voice crackled through his radio. 1. Day One pressed the button. Almost done, sir. Just need 10 more minutes. Make it 5. We need you in Section 9B next. The radio went quiet. Day One smiled sadly. That was how it always was. Nobody remembered his name. Nobody cared about the maintenance crew. They only called when something broke. He finished sealing the pipe and backed out of the tunnel. His knees hurt. His back hurt. He was 32 years old, but he felt older. 6 years in the Colonial Defense Force, and he was still just a corporal. Still just a technician. Down the corridor, he saw Lieutenant Mina walking with her security team. She was young, confident, and respected. Her uniform was perfect. Her boots were shined. She passed Day One without even looking at him. "Ma'am," Day One said, saluting. She kept walking. Day One lowered his hand. It didn't hurt anymore. He was used to it. In the mess hall, he ate alone. The other soldiers sat together, laughing and telling stories. Captain Jae-sung sat at the officers' table, surrounded by his elite strike team. They were the heroes, the strong ones, the important ones. Day One ate his rice and vegetables quietly. He listened to them talk about training exercises and combat simulations. They were preparing for threats that might never come. The galaxy was dangerous, but the times Eternal Dawn times had traveled for 3 months without problems. "Did you hear?" one soldier said. "Command thinks we might encounter the Vryn Empire near the Kepler system," another soldier laughed. "The Vryn won't bother us. They only attack military targets. We're just colonists." Day One wanted to say something. He wanted to tell them that the Vryn had destroyed 47 worlds, that they didn't care about military or civilian, that they conquered everything they touched, but he stayed quiet. Nobody would listen to a maintenance technician. After dinner, he returned to his small room. It was barely big enough for a bed and a locker. On the wall, he had a picture of his mother and father. They had died when he was young. He had no brothers or sisters. The military was his only family. He lay on his bed and closed his eyes. Tomorrow would be the same as today. More broken pipes, more ignored salutes, more invisible work that kept everyone alive. The alarm woke him at 0300 hours. Red lights flashed. The ship's emergency siren screamed through the corridors. Day One jumped from his bed and grabbed his uniform. His heart pounded. "All personnel to battle stations. This is not a drill. Unidentified vessels approaching." Day One ran into the hallway. Soldiers rushed past him, heading to their positions. He heard Lieutenant Mina shouting orders. He heard Captain Jae-sung mobilizing the strike team. Nobody told Day One where to go. Nobody gave him orders. He made his way to the maintenance control room. If the ship was in danger, systems would need repair. That was his battle station. The control room was empty except for Tae-hyun, an old engineer with gray hair. He was staring at the monitors with wide eyes. 12 ships, Tae-hyun said. Vryn warships. They came out of nowhere. Day One looked at the screens. The enemy ships were massive, covered in weapons and armor. They moved like predators, circling the times Eternal Dawn asterisk. "Why aren't we jumping away?" Day One asked. "They hit our jump drive with some kind of pulse. We're trapped." On the screen, Day One saw the Vryn ships opening fire. Blue energy beams struck the times, Eternal Dawn's time shields. The entire ship shook. Hull breach in Section 3A, someone shouted over the radio. Shields at 60%. Enemy boarding parties detected. Day one felt cold. This was real. This was happening. He watched on the monitors as Captain Jae-sung led his team toward the first breach point. They moved with perfect formation. Weapons ready. They were brave. They were trained. The Vryn came through the breach like a flood. They were tall, with 4 arms and armored skin. Their weapons fired red plasma that melted through human armor. Captain Jae-sung fought hard. His team fought hard. But there were too many Vryn. Too fast. Too strong. Day one watched the captain fall. Then another soldier. Then another. No, he whispered. More breaches opened across the ship. The Vryn were everywhere. The human forces were being torn apart. Lieutenant Min-ah's voice came over the radio, strained and desperate. All units. Fall back to... Quote. An explosion cut her off. Tae-hyun grabbed Dae-won's shoulder. We need to evacuate this section. Where do we go? Section 7D. It's deep in the ship. Maybe they won't reach it. They ran through the corridors. Around them, people screamed. Civilians fled in panic. Children cried. The ship's structure groaned as Vryn weapons tore through it. Dae-won helped an old woman who had fallen. He guided a family toward Section 7D. More people joined them, running from the killing. When they reached Section 7D, 30 people were huddled there. Among them was Hae-jin, a young woman with frightened eyes. She wore a medical student's uniform and carried a small emergency kit. Is anyone hurt? She asked, her voice shaking. Several people had cuts and burns. Hae-jin began treating them with trembling hands. Dae-won sealed the section door and locked it. It wouldn't hold against the Vryn for long. But it was something. Tae-hyun checked the monitors. The command center is gone. Most of the strike teams are dead. We've lost 70% of our combat personnel. A woman holding a child began to cry. What do we do? Everyone looked at Dae-won. He didn't know why. He was just a maintenance technician. Someone will come, Dae-won said. We just need to stay quiet and wait. But even as he said it, he knew the truth. Nobody was coming. The soldiers were dead or fighting. The ship was falling. They were alone. On the monitor, he saw Vryn warriors moving through the corridors. They killed everyone they found. They didn't take prisoners. They didn't show mercy. One of the Vryn stopped near a security camera. It looked directly at the lens with eyes like black glass. Then it spoke in a harsh, grinding voice that the ship's computer translated. Humans. Weak. Easy prey. The creature moved on, hunting for more victims. Dae-won felt something change inside him. These monsters had come to his ship. They were killing his people, and they thought humans were weak. He looked at the 30 frightened faces around him. At Hae-jin, trying to save lives with her small medical kit. At Tae-hyun, old and tired but still standing. At the mothers holding children. At the men trying to look brave. They weren't soldiers. They weren't heroes. They were just people who wanted to live. And Dae-won was just a maintenance technician. But he knew every pipe in this ship, every tunnel, every system, every weakness. The Vryn had made a mistake. They had ignored him. They had dismissed him as nothing. Just like everyone else always had. Tae-hyun, Dae-won said quietly. Can you show me how to access the environmental controls for Section 6C? The old engineer looked at him. Understanding slowly appeared in his eyes. Yes, I can show you. Hae-jin stopped bandaging a wound. What are you going to do? Dae-won pulled up a schematic of the ship on his datapad. He studied the locations of the Vryn forces. He studied the maintenance tunnels they didn't know about. I'm going to do my job, he said. I'm going to fix a problem. Outside the sealed door, the Vryn were hunting. They thought they had already won. They thought the humans were finished. They had made their first mistake when they attacked this ship. Their second mistake was letting Dae-won live. and they would learn what happened when you ignored someone who had nothing left to lose. Day One crawled through the maintenance tunnel with a plasma cutter in one hand and his datapad in the other. The metal walls pressed close around him. He could hear the Vryn moving in the corridor above, their heavy footsteps making the whole tunnel vibrate. 6 of them were in Section 6C. He had watched them on the cameras, killing 2 families who had tried to hide there. The Vryn laughed while they did it. They thought it was sport. Day One reached the environmental control junction. His hands didn't shake as he opened the panel. He had done this kind of work 1,000 times. Just another repair. Just another day. Except today, he wasn't fixing anything. Today, he was breaking it. Tae-hyun had shown him how to override the safety protocols. How to vent the atmosphere from a section. It was supposed to be used only in case of fire or contamination. Day One entered the commands. On his datapad, he watched the Vryn through the security cameras. They were searching through belongings, looking for anything valuable. He pressed the final button. The air vents opened. The atmosphere began rushing out of Section 6C into space. The Vryn noticed immediately. They turned toward the vents, their weapons raised. But you couldn't shoot air. You couldn't fight emptiness. In 30 seconds, the section was vacuum. The Vryn collapsed, their bodies freezing. They had been so strong, so confident. Now, they were just dead. Day One watched until he was sure. Then he sealed the vents and began crawling back. When he returned to Section 7D, the civilians were waiting. Hyejin helped him out of the tunnel. Her hands were warm. "Did it work?" she asked. 6 less of them, Day One said. An older man named Gil-soo spoke up. "But there are hundreds more. What good does 6 do?" Day One sat down heavily. His body ached from crawling through the tunnels. 6 means 30 people here get to live a little longer. Tae-hyun was studying the ship's systems. The Vryn have taken the bridge and the main engineering section. They control most of the ship now. "What about survivors?" Hyejin asked. "Hard to tell. Communication is mostly down. But I'm picking up some signals. There are people alive in other sections." Day One stood up again, even though his body didn't want to. "Can you send them a message through the maintenance network?" "Maybe. The Vryn don't seem to know about it yet." "Do it. Tell them to stay hidden. Tell them to stay quiet." Over the next hour, Tae-hyun made contact with scattered groups across the ship. 12 people here, 20 there. Most were civilians. A few were injured soldiers. One of those soldiers was Lieutenant Min-ah. Her voice came through the radio, weak and pained. "Who is this?" "Corporal Day One, ma'am. Maintenance Division." There was a pause. "The technician?" "Yes. Ma'am, I'm hit. Bleeding badly. I'm in Section 8G, with 3 wounded soldiers. The Vryn are searching this area." Day One pulled up the ship schematic. Section 8G was 4 sections away. The corridors between were crawling with Vryn. "I can't reach you through the main corridors," he said. "Then don't try. Save yourself." Hyejin grabbed his arm. "You can't go out there. It's suicide." Day One looked at her. She was right. It was suicide. The smart thing was to stay hidden, to wait for rescue that might never come. But he remembered watching Lieutenant Min-ah walk past him in the corridor. Remembered her not looking at him, not seeing him. Maybe that could help now. "The Vryn don't see me," he said. "They never have. That's my advantage." 3. He gathered supplies. A small medical kit. A plasma cutter. His datapad. He wore his maintenance uniform, the one that made him invisible. Tae-hyun showed him the maintenance routes. Tunnels that were too small for the tall Vryn. Crawl spaces behind the walls. Paths that didn't exist on any official map. Before he left, Hyejin stopped him. She pressed something into his hand. A small emergency beacon. "If you get in trouble," she said, "press this. I'll find a way to help." He wanted to tell her that wouldn't be possible. That if he got in trouble, He was already dead, but her eyes were so hopeful. "Thank you," he said instead. The journey through the tunnels was slow. Twice, he had to stop and hide as Vryn passed nearby. He could hear them talking in their harsh language, discussing how many humans they had killed, making it a competition. Rage burned in Daewon's chest, but he kept it quiet. Rage could wait. Survival came first. He reached Section 8G after an hour of crawling. Through a vent, he could see Lieutenant Minna slumped against a wall. Her uniform was soaked with blood. 3 soldiers lay near her, unconscious or dead. 2 Vryn guards stood at the section entrance. Daewon studied the area. There was an air duct above the Vryn. It led to the coolant system. If he could rupture it, he crawled through the walls until he was above the guards. Carefully, he cut into the coolant pipe with his plasma cutter. The metal glowed red, then white. The pipe burst. Superheated coolant sprayed down on the Vryn guards. They screamed, their armored skin hissing and melting. They fired their weapons blindly, hitting nothing but walls. When they finally collapsed, Daewon dropped from the vent. He ran to Lieutenant Minna. "Ma'am, can you move?" Her eyes opened slowly. You actually came." "Yes, ma'am." "That was stupid." "I know." He checked her wound. A plasma burn across her side. Bad, but not immediately fatal. He applied the emergency sealant from his kit. Of the 3 soldiers, only 1 was still alive. A young corporal named Sang-woo. He had a broken leg but could be moved. "We need to go," Daewon said. "More Vryn will come." Getting them through the tunnels was harder than coming alone. Lieutenant Minna could barely walk. Sang-woo had to crawl with his broken leg. Every meter was agony. They were halfway back when alarms blared. The Vryn had found the dead guards. "They're searching for us," Minna whispered. Daewon pulled up his datapad. Vryn were swarming toward their position. Too many to avoid. "There," Tae-hyun's voice came through the radio. "Maintenance junction 7 to 12. You can seal yourself in." They reached the junction just as Vryn footsteps echoed through the tunnel behind them. Daewon sealed the door and welded it shut with his plasma cutter. The Vryn pounded on the other side. The metal dented, but held. "That won't stop them for long," Sang-woo said. "It doesn't have to," Daewon said. "Just long enough." He led them through another series of tunnels, doubling back and using paths the Vryn couldn't follow. By the time they reached Section 7D, the lieutenant was unconscious. Haejin immediately began treating her. The civilians had set up a small medical area with whatever supplies they could find. "Will she live?" Daewon asked. "If we can get her real medical care. But we're running out of supplies." Daewon sat down. His whole body shook with exhaustion. He had saved 2 people. Only 2. And there were still hundreds of Vryn on the ship. Lieutenant Minna woke hours later. She looked at Daewon with different eyes now. "Why did you save me?" she asked. "You needed help. I never even knew your name." "I know." She was quiet for a moment. "Your plan. Hiding in the tunnels. Using the ship systems against them. How did you think of it?" "I didn't think of it. It's just what I do. I fix things. I know how everything works." "Then you know more about fighting on this ship than any of us." Daewon shook his head. "I'm not a fighter. You killed 8 Vryn today. You saved my life and Sang-woo's. That makes you a fighter." Tae-hyun interrupted. "I'm getting more signals. People are finding hiding spots. But they won't last. The Vryn are doing systematic searches." "How many survivors?" Lieutenant Minna asked. "Maybe 1,000. Scattered across the ship. We need to coordinate them," she said. "With what?" Gilsoo asked. "We have no weapons. No training." Lieutenant Minna looked at Daewon. "We have something better. We have someone who knows this ship better than the enemy does." Everyone turned to look at him. The invisible maintenance technician. The man nobody noticed. "I can't lead people," Daewon said. You already are, Hejin said softly. Daewon looked at the faces around him, scared but hopeful. They believed in him. He didn't know why. On the monitor, more Vryn moved through the ship, hunting, killing, confident in their victory. They still hadn't noticed him. Still thought he was nothing. All right, Daewon said. Tae-hyun, send a message to all survivors. Tell them to listen for instructions from the maintenance network. Tell them we're going to fight back. What's the plan? Sangwoo asked. Daewon pulled up the ship schematic. The Vryn think this is their ship now. But they don't know it like I do. Every system, every weakness, every trap. He pointed to different sections. We're going to teach them that this isn't their ship. It's ours. And every pipe, every wire, every vent is a weapon if you know how to use it. Lieutenant Minna smiled grimly. The enemy ignored you. That was their first mistake. No, Daewon said. Their first mistake was letting me fight. The first coordinated strike happened at dawn cycle, though there was no real dawn in space. Daewon had spent hours planning it with Tae-hyun and Lieutenant Minna. Now, lying in a ventilation shaft above Section 4A, he watched 40 Vryn soldiers gather for what they thought was a victory celebration. They had piled human belongings in the center of the room. Photos, clothes, children's toys. They were going to burn it all. Daewon pressed the radio. Everyone in position? 3 voices answered. Survivors he had contacted through the maintenance network. People hiding in other parts of the ship. On my signal, he said. He watched the Vryn leader step forward, raising some kind of torch. The creature spoke in its grinding language, something about human weakness. Now, Daewon whispered. In 3 different sections across the ship, survivors hit the controls. Nitrogen oxide flooded through the ventilation systems. Daewon had shown them how to route it from the recycling plant, how to override the safety protocols. The Vryn in Section 4A noticed the gas immediately. They rushed toward the doors, but Daewon had already sealed them remotely. They pounded against the metal, their weapons firing uselessly. In 5 minutes, it was over. 40 Vryn lay dead. Daewon felt nothing. No triumph. No guilt. Just the cold certainty that this was war, and he was learning how to fight it. The same thing happened in Sections 2C and 9F. 90 Vryn total. Gone in minutes. On the ship's main communication channel, he heard the Vryn commander's voice for the first time. Thelvas. The name came through the translator as something like Iron Claw. Find who did this, Thelvas roared. Find the human commander organizing this resistance. Daewon almost laughed. Commander. They thought some military genius was coordinating the attacks. They couldn't imagine it was just a maintenance technician with access to the environmental controls. Over the next 3 days, Daewon orchestrated 17 more strikes. He collapsed a corridor on a Vryn patrol. He overloaded the lighting in Section 5B, blinding the enemy, while human survivors attacked with improvised weapons. He even used the ship's artificial gravity, shutting it off in sections where Vryn were concentrated, then turning it back on at triple strength. The Vryn were dying, but so were humans. Every attack had risks. Sometimes, civilians were caught in the crossfire. Sometimes, the Vryn retaliated against innocents. Each death weighed on Daewon, but he couldn't stop. Stopping meant everyone died. In Section 7D, their group had grown. More survivors found their way to the safe zone. They now had 60 people, including a dozen soldiers who had survived the initial attacks. Sang-woo had become Daewon's right hand. His leg was still broken, but he helped coordinate the strikes from the monitoring station. The Vryn are changing tactics, Sang-woo said one day. They're staying in smaller groups now, harder to trap. They're learning, Lieutenant Minna said. She could walk again, though slowly. That means we need to adapt too. Haejin was treating a woman who had been burned in a failed rescue attempt. The medical supplies were almost gone. We've saved 300 people, she said quietly. But we can't keep this up forever. Day One knew she was right. The Vryn still controlled most of the ship. They had more warriors, more weapons. Time was on their side. Then we need to hit them harder, he said. Taehyun pulled up a schematic. The Vryn have set up a command post in the cargo bay. 20 guards, plus their second-in-command. Kralth. That's suicide, Lieutenant Minna said. We don't have the firepower. We don't need firepower, Daewon said. We need the magnetic containment system. Everyone looked at him. The cargo bay has magnetic locks for holding metal cargo during transport. If we overload them, we can create an EMP pulse. It'll disable the Vryn combat armor. For how long? Sang-woo asked. Maybe 30 seconds. That's not much time. It's enough if we're ready. The plan was dangerous. They would need to lure Kralth's entire force into the cargo bay. Then survivors would attack during those 30 seconds, while the Vryn armor was disabled. It meant sending people into direct combat, hand to hand, no second chances. I'll lead the attack team, Lieutenant Minna said. You're still injured, Daewon protested. So are most of us. She looked around at the ragged survivors. But we're still here, and I'm tired of hiding. 12 people volunteered for the attack team. Sang-woo insisted on going despite his broken leg. A woman named Ji-woo, who had lost her family. A young soldier named Kwan, who couldn't have been more than 19. Daewon didn't want to send them. Didn't want to be responsible for their deaths. But Heejin touched his shoulder. They're choosing this. You're giving them a chance to fight back. That's all anyone can ask. The trap took 2 days to prepare. Daewon worked with Taehyun to modify the magnetic containment system. It was delicate work. Too much power, and it would explode. Too little, and it wouldn't generate the EMP. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Minna trained the attack team. They practiced moving silently, striking fast. They made weapons from whatever they could find. Pipes, tools, even broken pieces of the ship itself. When everything was ready, Daewon created the bait. He hacked into the Vryn communication network and sent a false signal. Made it look like a large group of human survivors was hiding in the cargo bay. Kralth took it. The Vryn, second in command, was arrogant, eager to crush the resistance personally. Daewon watched on the monitors as Kralth led 100 elite warriors toward the cargo bay. The creature was massive, even for a Vryn, with battle scars across its armored skin. They're coming, he said into the radio. The attack team was hidden in the maintenance tunnels around the cargo bay. Waiting, scared, but determined. Daewon's hand hovered over the EMP control. His heart pounded so hard, he thought it might break through his chest. The Vryn entered the cargo bay. They spread out, searching for the humans they expected to find. Kralth walked to the center of the bay. He looked around. Suspicious. It's a trap, the creature said in its grinding voice. Now, Daewon shouted. He activated the magnetic containment overload. The entire cargo bay lit up with blue electricity. The Vryn combat armor sparked and died. Their weapons went offline. For 30 seconds, they were vulnerable. The attack team poured from the tunnels. Lieutenant Minna fired the only working plasma rifle they had, taking down 3 Vryn before it overheated. Sang-woo swung a metal pipe, crushing a Vryn's skull. Ji-woo fought with tears streaming down her face, remembering her family. It was brutal. It was desperate. It was hand-to-hand combat against warriors who had conquered 47 worlds. But the humans fought like they had nothing to lose. Because they didn't. Daewon watched from the control room, his stomach twisting. He saw young Kwan go down, a Vryn blade through his chest. Saw Ji-woo fall, her weapon breaking. 20 seconds. Lieutenant Minna fought her way toward Kralth. The massive Vryn commander was fighting without armor now, but he was still deadly. His forearms moved like whips, striking soldiers aside. 25 seconds. Sang-woo threw his broken pipe. It hit Kralth in the eye. The creature roared. Turning toward him, Lieutenant Minna lunged. She drove a sharpened pipe into Kralth's throat. Green blood sprayed. Kralth, 30 seconds. The Vryn armor came back online. Their weapons powered up. Fall back, Lieutenant Minna screamed. The humans scattered into the tunnels. Some didn't make it. Day 1 watched 6 people die in the retreat, but Kralth was dead. The Vryn, second in command, lay on the cargo bay floor, green blood pooling around him, and 70 more Vryn had fallen with him. The attack team made it back to Section 7D. They were bloody, broken, exhausted. Ji-Woo sobbed in Heijin's arms. Sang-Woo's broken leg had shattered worse. He would never walk right again, but they had won. Lieutenant Minna collapsed against a wall. At what cost? Day 1 asked quietly. The only cost that matters, she said. We're still alive. On the monitors, Day 1 watched the Vryn discover Kralth's body. He saw them carry it away with what looked like shock. Maybe even fear. Then the main communication channel activated. Commander, Thelvas's voice filled the speakers. Humans, I see you now. I see your resistance. But you only delay the inevitable. There was a pause. I know someone leads you. Someone who knows this ship. Someone who thinks they can defeat the Vryn Empire. Another pause. Show yourself. Come to the bridge. Surrender. And I will let the others live. Hide. And I will kill every human on this ship. You have 1 hour. 7. The transmission ended. Everyone looked at Day 1. You can't, Heijin said. He'll kill you. If I don't go, he kills everyone. He'll kill everyone anyway, Lieutenant Minna said. The Vryn don't take prisoners. Don't show mercy. This is a trap. I know. Day 1 said. But he also knew he couldn't hide while everyone else died. Not anymore. He stood up, ignoring his aching body. Tae-hyun, can you access the Vryn flagship systems? What? No. They're too heavily encrypted. But if someone was on the flagship, could they create an access point? Tae-hyun thought for a moment. Maybe. If they had the right equipment. Day 1 pulled up a schematic of the docking area. The Vryn flagship was connected to the times, eternal dawn times, through an umbilical. An idea began to form. A desperate, probably impossible idea. How long to prepare? He asked. For what? One last strike. Not against the Vryn on our ship. Against their flagship. Everyone stared at him. You're insane, Lieutenant Minna said. But she was smiling. Tell me the plan. Day 1 walked alone toward the bridge. His footsteps echoed in the empty corridors. He had no weapons. No armor. Just his maintenance uniform. And the knowledge that he was probably walking to his death. Behind him, hidden in the maintenance tunnels, the real plan was unfolding. While Thelvas focused on him, Heijin and Yuna were crawling through the docking umbilical toward the Vryn flagship. Yuna was a systems analyst they had rescued 3 days ago. She knew computer systems like Day 1 knew ship maintenance. If they could reach the flagship and access its computer core, Tae-hyun could hack it, create a feedback loop in the weapons array, make the Vryn ship destroy itself. It was a desperate plan. 1,000 things could go wrong, but Day 1 had learned something over these weeks. Sometimes desperate plans were the only ones that worked. The bridge doors opened. Vryn warriors lined the walls, their weapons pointed at him. In the center stood Commander Thelvas. The creature was huge, nearly 3 meters tall. His armor was decorated with symbols that probably meant victories. Worlds conquered. Species destroyed. You, Thelvas said. You are the one. Yes. Thelvas walked closer, studying him. I accessed your military records. Corporal Day 1. Maintenance technician. Evaluation. Unsuitable for command. Lacks ambition. Adéquate technicien. The commander's voice carried something like confusion. Maybe anger. You killed 300 of my warriors. You destroyed my second in command. You turned this ship into a battlefield. Thelvas leaned down until his face was centimeters from Daewon's. And you are nothing. A technician. Not a warrior. Not a commander. Nothing. I know, Daewon said. Why did your military hide you? Why were you never given command? Daewon thought about all the times he had been ignored. All the salutes that went unanswered. All the suggestions dismissed. All the years of being invisible. Because I was never supposed to fight, he said. I was supposed to build. To fix things. To keep people alive. He met Thelvas's black eyes. But you made me choose. Choose what? Between letting my people die and becoming what you made me. Thelvas straightened. You think you have won something. But look around. I hold this bridge. I control your ship. You have saved some civilians, yes. But the ship is still mine. For now, brave words from a dead man. Thelvas turned to his warriors. He has bought his people 1 hour with his surrender. That is more mercy than they deserve. In the maintenance tunnels, He-Jin and Yuna reached the Vryn flagship. The umbilical connection was heavily guarded on the flagship side, but Daewon had planned for that. Back on the Times Eternal Dawn *, Lieutenant Minna led the final attack. Every survivor who could fight hit the Vryn positions simultaneously across the ship. It wasn't about winning. It was about distraction. The guards at the umbilical rushed to help their comrades. For 3 minutes, the passage was unguarded. He-Jin and Yuna slipped aboard the flagship. The interior was alien and hostile. The corridors were too tall, the air too hot. Strange symbols covered the walls. There, Yuna whispered, pointing to what looked like a computer terminal. They connected Tae-hyun's hacking device. Back on the Times Eternal Dawn *, the old engineer began his work. On the bridge, Thelvas was speaking into a communicator, giving orders to his fleet. Daewon listened carefully. The Vryn were planning something. A final sweep of the Times. Eternal Dawn Times to kill all remaining humans. Then, they would take the ship as a trophy. You want to understand, Daewon said. Why someone like me beat warriors like yours? Yes, it defies logic. Because you looked at me and saw nothing. Just like my own people did. Daewon felt a strange calm. You didn't prepare for nothing. Didn't defend against nothing. You ignored me completely. And that was a mistake, Thelvas said. I admit it. But the mistake is corrected now. Is it? Something in Daewon's tone made Thelvas pause. The commander's eyes narrowed. What have you done? Before Daewon could answer, alarms blared across the bridge. A Vryn warrior shouted something in their language. Thelvas rushed to a console. My flagship, he whispered. Someone is on my flagship. On the Vryn ship. Yuna worked frantically. I need more time, she said into her radio. You have 2 minutes, Tae-hyun responded. Then, they'll trace the connection. He-Jin watched the corridor, her heart racing. She held a small plasma cutter she had taken from the maintenance supplies. It wasn't much of a weapon. Footsteps echoed. Vryn warriors were coming. They found us, He-Jin said. I'm almost done, Yuna said, her fingers flying across the terminal. The Vryn rounded the corner. 4 of them, weapons raised. He-Jin stepped in front of Yuna. The plasma cutter shook in her hands. For everyone who died, she whispered. She fired. The plasma bolt caught the first Vryn in the chest. The creature fell. But the others kept coming. On the bridge, Thelvas grabbed Daewon by the throat. Call them back. Order your people to surrender. Can't. Daewon choked out. They make their own choices. Thelvas threw him against a wall. Daewon's vision went dark for a moment. He tasted blood, then watched them die. On the monitors, Daewon saw the Vryn warriors on the flagship getting closer to He-Jin and Yuna. Saw He-Jin fighting desperately with her inadequate weapon. He wanted to call out, wanted to tell her to run. But that would ruin everything. Yuna pressed the final command. Done. The hacking device pulsed. Across the Vrin flagship, systems began to fail. Taehyun's voice came through the radio. "I'm in. I have control." The Vrin weapons array activated on its own. The massive cannons turned inward, targeting the flagship's own reactor. On the bridge, Thelvas saw what was happening. His eyes widened with understanding and rage. No. He reached for the controls to override the systems. But it was too late. The feedback loop was already active. "Everyone off the flagship!" Thelvas roared into his communicator. "Evacuate now!" Thelvast. Heejin grabbed Yuna and ran. Behind them, the Vrin warriors forgot about them, rushing toward the escape pods. The two women made it back through the umbilical just as the flagship's reactor went critical. On the Times Eternal Dawn asterisk, every screen showed the same thing. The Vrin flagship tearing itself apart from the inside. Explosions rippled across its hull. The other Vrin ships in the fleet scattered, trying to get clear. Thelvas watched his flagship die. His command center. His fleet's heart. Then he turned to Day One, with pure hatred. "You did this. We did this." Day One corrected. "All of us. Every person you dismissed as weak, as prey, as nothing." Throughout the Times Eternal Dawn asterisk, the Vrin warriors received panicked orders. Return to the fleet. Evacuate the human ship. Their flagship was gone. And without it, they couldn't coordinate. Lieutenant Minna heard the orders. She signaled the survivors. "They're retreating. Hit them now." The humans surged from their hiding places. Not to kill, but to drive the Vrin toward the docking bays. To push them off the ship. In Section 7D, Taehyun activated every defensive system still working. Bulkhead doors slammed shut, cutting off Vrin escape routes. Atmosphere vented from key corridors. Gravity fluctuated. The Vrin, so confident days ago, now fled in confusion. On the bridge, Thelvas stood alone. His warriors had retreated, his fleet was in disarray, and in front of him stood the maintenance technician who had destroyed everything. "I will kill you myself," Thelvas said. He drew a massive blade, crackling with energy. Day One had no weapon. No training in hand-to-hand combat, but he had spent weeks fighting. Weeks surviving. Weeks learning that sometimes you didn't need training. You just needed to refuse to die. Thelvas lunged. Day One rolled aside, grabbing a piece of debris. He threw it at the commander's face. It did nothing, but it bought him a second. He ran toward the engineering console. Thelvas chased him, moving with terrifying speed. Day One's fingers flew across the controls. He knew this ship, knew every system. As Thelvas reached him, Day One activated the bridge's emergency protocols. The floor panels electrified. Thelvas screamed as electricity coursed through his body. His armor protected him somewhat, but not enough. Day One kept the power running. His hands were shaking. His whole body was shaking. "You called us weak," he said over Thelvas's screams. "You called us prey." The commander fell to his knees. "But we're still here. And you're not." Thelvas tried to stand, tried to raise his weapon. Day One picked up a piece of broken metal. It was sharp on one end, a maintenance tool that had become a weapon. He had never killed anyone face to face before. Always from a distance, through screens and systems. But this was different. This was personal. "For Captain Jae Sung," Day One said. "For Kwan. For Ji Woo's family. For everyone." He drove the metal into Thelvas's throat. The commander fell. Green blood spread across the floor. Day One collapsed beside him, exhausted beyond measure. The bridge doors opened. Lieutenant Minna rushed in with Sang-woo and a group of armed survivors. "The Vrin are evacuating," she said. "We're sealing the airlocks behind them." They're leaving." Day One nodded. He couldn't speak, couldn't move. Hae-jin appeared in the doorway. She was bleeding from several cuts, but alive. When she saw Day One, she ran to him. "You're alive." "Barely. The flagship? Gone." Taehyun did it. Around the bridge, survivors gathered. They looked at Thelvas's body. At day 1, covered in blood. Is it over? Someone asked. On the monitors, the last Vryn ship was pulling away from the Time's Eternal Dawn asterisk. The fleet was scattering, fleeing into deep space. It's over, Lieutenant Minna said. The ship fell silent except for the sound of people crying, some from relief, some from loss. Day 1 looked around at the faces. So many missing. So many dead. But 23,000 had survived. Because a maintenance technician had refused to let them die. Because the enemy had made one critical mistake. They had ignored him. 3 days after the battle, Day 1 sat in the damaged mess hall. The ship was a wreck. Holes in the hull, systems failing, entire sections destroyed. But they were alive, and the repair crews were working around the clock. He stared at his rice and vegetables. The same meal he had eaten in this same hall weeks ago, when he was just another invisible maintenance worker. Everything had changed. Nothing had changed. May I sit? Day 1 looked up. Admiral Kyung-min stood there, the highest-ranking officer who had survived the attack. She had been in a different part of the ship during the initial assault. Of course, ma'am. She sat across from him. Her uniform was crisp despite everything. She studied him for a long moment. I've been reviewing what happened, she said. Reading reports, watching security footage. Corporal, you saved this ship. It wasn't just me. It was everyone. But you led them. You organized the resistance. You killed Commander Thelvas yourself. Day 1 said nothing. He didn't feel like a hero. He felt tired. I'm here to offer you a battlefield commission, Admiral Kyung-min continued. Major. With command of the rebuilt security division. The offer hung in the air. Major. Command. Everything Day 1 had never been given before because he was unsuitable for command. No thank you, ma'am. Admiral Kyung-min blinked. I'm sorry? I appreciate the offer. But no. You don't want to advance? Don't want command? I never wanted command. Day 1 said quietly. I just wanted to fix things. To keep people alive. That's all I'm good at. You're good at a lot more than that. Maybe. But I'm still just a maintenance technician. That's who I am. The Admiral was quiet for a moment. Your file said you lacked ambition. I thought that was why they never promoted you. It wasn't lack of ambition. It was knowing what I was meant to do. And what's that? Day 1 gestured around the damaged mess hall. This. Fixing broken things. Making sure the pipes work, and the air circulates, and the gravity stays on. Someone has to do that work. Someone has to be the person nobody notices. Admiral Kyung-min stood. The offer stands if you change your mind. But I understand. Sometimes the most important people are the ones we overlook. She saluted him. Thank you, Corporal. After she left, Hee-jin slid into the seat across from him. I heard, she said. You turned down a promotion. Yes. Why? Because being a major wouldn't let me do what I do best. She smiled. You're impossible. I know. They ate in comfortable silence. Hee-jin's hands were bandaged from her fight on the Vryn flagship. She would have scars. They all would. What will you do? Day 1 asked. After we reach Kepler? 4.4.2? Finish my medical degree. Help build the colony. Save lives. She looked at him. What about you? Same thing I've always done. Keep the systems running. Make sure people have what they need. Sev. That's all? That's everything. Across the hall, Lieutenant Minna was eating with the surviving soldiers. She caught Day 1's eye and nodded. There was respect there now. Recognition. But Day 1 knew that in a few weeks, things would go back to normal. And he was okay with that. Over the next month, they repaired what they could. The times, Eternal Dawn times, would never be the same. But it could fly. It could reach Kepler 4.4.2. Day 1 spent his days in the maintenance tunnels, fixing pipes and wiring, the same work he had done before the attack. But sometimes, people would stop and thank him. A mother whose children he had saved, a soldier who had fought beside him, a civilian who had hidden in Section 7D. He always said the same thing. Just doing my job. Tae-hyun retired from the engineering corps. His hands shook too much now from stress. But he spent his time teaching young people about ship systems, making sure the knowledge wouldn't be lost. Yuna became the ship's chief systems analyst. She improved their security protocols, making sure they would never be caught off guard again. Sang-woo walked with a limp now. His broken leg had healed wrong, but he stayed in the military, training soldiers in guerrilla tactics. The corporal's way, he called it. Hae-jin finished her medical training early. The colony would need doctors, and she had learned more in the battle than any textbook could teach. She and Dae-won had coffee together every morning. Sometimes they talked about the battle. More often, they talked about normal things. Plans for the colony, the books they were reading, small moments of peace. One evening, as Dae-won was replacing a coolant filter in Section 9C, his radio crackled. Dae-won, it's Tae-hyun. Can you come to the observation deck? Is something broken? No. Just come. When he arrived, he found dozens of people gathered. Survivors from the battle. Civilians and soldiers. People he had saved. And people he barely knew. In the center stood a young girl named Bora. She couldn't have been more than 12. We wanted to thank you, Bora said. Her voice was small but clear. You saved my parents. You saved all of us. The crowd parted. Behind them was a plaque, hastily made from ship metal. It read, "In memory of those lost, defending the eternal dawn, and in honor of those who refused to let us fall." No names, no ranks, just the truth. Dae-won felt his throat tighten. I didn't do anything special. Yes, you did, Hae-jin said. She stood beside him. You saw people who needed help, and you helped them, even when it was impossible. Even when it meant risking everything. Anyone would have done the same. But they didn't, Lieutenant Minna said. You did. When everyone else was dying or hiding, you fought. And you taught us to fight. Dae-won looked at all the faces. So many of them wouldn't be here without the decisions he had made, the traps he had set, the desperate plans that had somehow worked. I was terrified the whole time, he admitted. Every decision. I thought I was going to get everyone killed. But you made the decisions anyway, Sang-woo said. Bora stepped forward. She handed him something. A small metal pin, shaped like a wrench. We made this for you, so you remember that fixing things can save the world. Dae-won took the pin. His hands were shaking. Thank you. The gathering dispersed slowly. People returned to their lives, but the plaque remained, a permanent reminder of what they had survived. Hae-jin stayed behind with him. They stood at the observation window, looking out at the stars. Do you think they'll remember? She asked. Years from now, when we're all old? Some will, some won't. That's okay. It doesn't bother you? That people will forget? No. I was invisible before. I'll be invisible again. That's how I work best. She took his hand. You're not invisible to me. I know. They stood there in silence, watching the stars slide past. Kepler 442 was still weeks away. There would be more problems, more things to fix, more challenges. But for now, they had peace. The next morning, Dae-won was back in the maintenance tunnels. A water line had burst in Section 3D. He crawled through the narrow space, toolbox in hand. It was dark and cramped and uncomfortable. His knees hurt. His back hurt. But this was who he was. A maintenance technician. A fixer of broken things. He reached the burst pipe and began working. Behind him, he heard someone crawling through the tunnel. Need help? Bora's voice echoed. Dae-won turned. The young girl was there, wearing a maintenance uniform that was too big for her. "What are you doing here?" Tae-hyun said, "I could apprentice with the engineering team. Learn how to fix things. Like you." Daewon smiled. "It's hard work. Most people don't want to do it." IMP'd. I know. That's why it's important." He handed her a wrench. "Okay. Let me show you how to seal a water line." End quote. 1. As they worked together in the narrow tunnel, Daewon thought about the future. The colony they would build. The next generation who would maintain it. People like Bo-ra, who understood that the important work wasn't always the visible work. "Can I ask you something?" Bo-ra said, as she tightened a fitting. "Sure. Were you scared? During the battle?" "Every single day. But you fought anyway." "I didn't have a choice. People needed help. That's what makes you brave. Doing it, even when you're scared." Daewon thought about that. He had never considered himself brave. Just desperate. Just doing what needed to be done. But maybe that was the same thing. They finished the repair and crawled back toward the maintenance bay. The ship hummed around them. Systems working, people living. In the maintenance bay, Daewon logged the repair. Just another entry in the maintenance records. Waterline. Section 3D, repaired. No mention of battles. No mention of Vrin. Just normal work. And that was perfect. Haejin found him there an hour later. She had news. The ship's sensors had detected Kepler 442. They would arrive in 2 weeks. "A new beginning," she said. "Same as the old beginning. Just different pipes to fix." She laughed. "You're incorrigible." "I know." As she left, Daewon returned to his work. He had a full schedule today. A coolant system in Section 5B needed calibration. The artificial gravity in Section 7D was fluctuating. The air recycling plant needed a routine inspection. Normal work, invisible work, the work that kept everyone alive. He picked up his toolbox and headed into the maintenance tunnels. Behind him, Bo-ra followed, eager to learn. And somewhere in the ship, Lieutenant Minna was training new recruits, teaching them that sometimes the most dangerous enemy was the one you ignored. And Yuna was improving computer security, making sure they would never be caught unprepared again. And Sang-woo was teaching tactics, showing soldiers that creativity could defeat superior force. And Tae-hyun was passing on knowledge, ensuring the next generation would understand the systems that kept them alive. They were all fixing things in their own way, building something better from the wreckage. The Vrin Empire had taught them a valuable lesson. Never underestimate someone just because they seem ordinary. Never dismiss someone just because they're different from you, because the person you ignore might be the one who saves everyone, or destroys you. Daewon smiled as he crawled through the tunnel, heading toward his next repair. He was just a maintenance technician. Just an ordinary person doing ordinary work. But he had learned something too. Sometimes ordinary was exactly what the world needed. Sometimes invisible was the most powerful thing you could be. And sometimes the enemy's biggest mistake was the best gift they could give you. The gift of being underestimated. The gift of being ignored. Until it was too late.